Okay, we're going to start. Everyone has their food pretty much except Matt. Okay. Sorry, I was waiting for...
No, go.
Okay. Some people have to leave soon, so we'll start. We just want to thank our legislators for making time to be here. They both have such busy schedules, and for those of you on our staff who don't know, Senator Cullimore is in leadership, and so that's even more meetings. And so I'm really honored that both he and Representative John Arthur, who's a school teacher and should be in this class, are here this morning and taking time to be with us. And so we'll start with just introductions so that you can know who our staff are, and then you can tell us more about yourselves, what your priorities are, and then we'll give the time especially to Brian Allen. He needs to leave at 8.
Okay. Councilmember Ellen Burrell for District 4.
Suzanne Hyden, District 2.
Councilman Matt Holton, represent everything west of Highland Drive, was confused with being John Arthur by a constituent about a week ago. Half Koreans married to blonde Caucasians, and they said, "Congratulations on being in the House." I said, "No, wrong guy."
I'm Shane Topham, I'm the city attorney.
I'm Ron Mercer, the police chief.
Chris McHugh, the assistant chief.
I'm Barbara Higgins. I'm the Director of HR Records and Culture.
Matt Shep, Public Works Director and the city engineer.
Scott Jurgis, I'm the finance director.
Jim Spone, the Community and Economic Development Director.
Greg Curtis, contract lobbies.
Brian Allen, lobbyist.
Yeah.
Eric Cullimore, Senate District 19, which covers just a little bit of the southern sliver of Cottonwood Heights, and then a lot of East Sandy and Draper, even over to Utah County a little bit. This will be my 8th session. I've really appreciated always working with Cottonwood Heights and doing what we can at the state level to help out the cities here over on the East Bench, by the canyons, and look forward to continuing to work with you guys.
John Arthur, Brian High, class of 2000. I represent House District 41, which is mostly Cottonwood Heights, and then a little bit of Holiday, Murray, Midvale, Town of Brighton, and Town of Alta. It is an honor to now get to represent the community where I grew up.
Maybe just take it to Brian just for a minute. I'd like Brian to share because Brian is, I know Greg is there and protecting us for a lot of funding and other help, but Brian Allen is the one that I worked with a lot in the legislature and really is keeping our, helping us. So just share anything you want, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I guess I'm probably the champion of impossible causes, right? It seems like we're always trying to, there's a natural tension between state and local government, and I think it's a healthy tension most of the time. And so we work really hard as lobbyists to protect the interests of the cities, to protect the ability of the city to make sort of self-determination decisions. And sometimes that becomes at odds with policy that's being pushed in the legislature. So our role is to educate and to advocate for the city, educate about the issues. I always tell people I'm part teacher, part salesman, and as a lobbyist. And so we're just there as a resource. We're there to help answer questions you might have about any policies that affect local government. And I've been doing it for a while. I'm kind of like probably now considered a dinosaur up there. But I was in the legislature a long time ago, and back in the 90s. That's been that long. And I didn't lobby right after. I started lobbying a few years after I got out. And kind of got into it by accident. But I love representing the city. I've represented the city since it was a city. And it's a great place. It's a great place to represent because they do things so well here. And so we're excited about the coming session. I know there's going to be a lot of housing policy, a lot of, and some of that I'm sometimes impacts local government. So we'll keep you informed and educated. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. We're happy to be here as a resource. And, you know, we're some of the people that actually still like legislature, so that's good. Happy to be there to help.
You want to say anything, Greg?
Questions, Ryan works a lot of the policy, we communicate a lot during the session. I am primarily focused on trying to obtain funding for anything and everything,
Traction control funding was the most recent thing that is helping our department.
Yeah, it's an ongoing, I get about $250,000 a year or something.
No.
No, less. We need that. If $250,000, yes, that would be awesome.
Well, we get 170,000 a year here.
I think 180. 180,
Yeah.
which doesn't really cover the cost.
Isn't there $500,000 going on this fund?
Yeah, but Sandy gets part, we get part.
Salt Lake County Sheriff.
Salt Lake County Sheriff.
Sweet, carve out the sheriffs.
So that was not contemplated, so.
It was supposed to be split between us and Sandy, because the county picked up a portion of it at some point.
And he, I mean,
We'll
it
talk-
basically
We'll talk with one of your
it
constituents.
basically happened with because of those two people right there helped make that
I
happen.
thought I was going to Sandy comment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he wrote it.
Yeah, considering that he's the one that did it,
I know.
we'll have a conversation afterwards, because one of your constituents who oversees that fund, Director of UDOT, I just know in conversations in Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office was never contemplated for this.
And they haven't done it to assist with crash control.
All right, well, something, but that would be an example, there's a couple of million dollars to perform. And primarily, the budget is generally set by House and Senate majority leadership. So that's what
You may want to know, a new development just since last year is that UDOT decided to widen the shoulder on the west side of Wasatch Boulevard, SR 210, from the Bengal Boulevard intersection southbound all the way to the mouth of the canyon, which has created more traffic officer hours to, on the snow mornings, pull the cars over into the shoulder that are waiting to get into Little Cottonwood Canyon. So that has actually put more pressure on our police. Without, to my knowledge, were you able to secure more funding for your traffic officers for that? So this is something UDOT decided on. They widened to make the shoulder so that local traffic is not, so that the traffic is moved to the side of the road, and locals, which I appreciate representing District 4, can move about on the 2.5 hours of gridlock on these snow mornings. But again, we did not receive additional funding in order to keep that roadway clear for locals. So in your argument for what we need, it would sure help if we could get a couple $100,000 more so that on those snow mornings we can actually help get those cars off to the side of the road.
Tell me, the west side of,
So everybody calls it Wasatch Boulevard. It's technically State Route 210.
I think you're talking from the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon.
No, it starts at Bengal Boulevard, which is roughly a quarter mile south of the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon. There's an intersection, Bengal Boulevard, right where, this is Bengal Boulevard.
Right.
So where it meets Wasatch Boulevard southbound, all the way to the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon, UDOT widened the shoulder just this last year. And they did that with the good intention of allowing for vehicles that are waiting to get into Little Cottonwood Canyon to wait on the side so locals can move around. We need that. But we didn't get additional funding for our police department to cover the officers that it takes to move those vehicles. Because that's 2.5 miles of roadway that we're expected to cover.
I'm going to just ask the senator, do you think it's what's on?
Sorry, I think that's, yeah, it's pertinent. Now it's almost 8 o'clock.
Okay, so Our city manager is not here today. His name is Jared Gerber, and he has been with us about 1.5 years, and he had knee surgery this week. So we miss him, and he's doing a great job helping our staff. So overall, you have a great handout here about our city. We're a member of the League of Cities and Towns, and we support that local control is so important for us because of these details, like with the road widening. This is an opportunity for us to share with you those details. You can see about our population. We have an educated, the people living in our city have good incomes to be able to afford to live here. We are working on our general plan, which is 10 years overdue, and we hope to have that finished this year. So that's a big focus for our city and our town center. A year ago, our city passed a bond at the ballot. So about 52% of our citizens voted in support of a town center. And this is at the Raines property. And the city will maintain ownership there. We are leasing to a developer, and we have chosen a developer, Onyx and Thrive. This is a company that was involved with the development of Holiday Town Center. So they have a good track record, and we've been meeting with them, but it is a very complex situation for us to keep holding the land and lease to them. And so it makes it complex and a little bit slower. We're still working on getting the leases for Walgreens and Dollar Tree to be ended so that we can begin to work there, that they can begin to work there. Does any staff want to give any more details on this? Shane's kind of... Yeah, I'm going to pass it to Shane. It's on.
I'm happy to talk a little bit. Because the citizens voted to tax themselves to acquire this property, we felt that it was appropriate for it to remain a community asset. And so rather than flip the property to a developer and stand back and watch them do it, as the mayor mentioned, we decided to long-term ground lease it to them so that periodically it can come up for being refreshed and renewed. These projects usually last about 40 years, as we all know. They start getting a little rough around the edges. So that's the approach that we're using. We feel confident with these development partners that they will do a good job. But it is heavy in the documentation as far as that goes. So anyway, we're working through that. As the mayor mentioned, the impediment right now is we just inherited a couple of long-term ground leases that affect bits of the property that we're having to work through that situation.
Do you want to say anything, Sean?
Don't introduce yourself.
Just
Sean Newell.
Mayor, I have a question to ask him on a different topic. Do you have other things you want to go to first?
you go ahead.
Okay, so Representative Cofert's got this property tax adjustment of giving additional break to homeowners and shifting that focus to businesses. The House GOP, the House majority came out with a priority that this is something that they're wanting to do. I don't know if the Senate, and Senator Colmore, maybe you can answer this, but I don't know if the Senate's come out and said if this is a priority of theirs. The reason I ask this question is if you take it to, I think they're even saying, taking it from 45 to 60, they're obviously going to start high and it's part of negotiations, but if they're wanting to shift that burden, make it so that homes pay less, businesses pay more. When you've got communities such as Cottonwood Heights, I would even say Bluffdale's probably in a worse situation where you don't have as much commercial as some other cities like Salt Lake or Sandy, and you shift that burden. This city is having discussions right now on the need for additional property taxes. The legislature passes a bill, shifts that burden. If you still need $100, what do these communities do other than just do another tax increase to try to get that $100 back if they don't have the business base? And so I don't know if you have additional thoughts on that. I think that'd be super insightful for us as we're having tax discussions. And just so my colleagues know, the legislature has multiple property tax proposals up there. There's some that are saying you can only do 3%. There are those that are wanting to shift, including the speaker, to basically say we have a 45% exemption, take it up to 60%. That would obviously impact what we're going to do this year. Do we need to pass it back?
I could hear you.
Yeah.
You want me to speak up?
Yeah.
I think
We don't have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I've already got myself into trouble for undermining House priorities. So I'll try to say this gently, but we have concerns.
yeah.
You know, that it sounds nice.
It sounds nice just to raise the residential exemption and maybe, you know, some residents get a little bit of a win. But really it's, you know, if you understand property tax, it's the same dollars are coming in, right? And so all you're doing is shifting where you're paying that. Households are going to pay that one way or the other because commercial properties just pass it on to consumers, right? So we actually explored this a lot a couple of years ago when, you know, we saw some huge property tax spikes because of COVID and, you know, the shifting values of commercial and office space and all of that. But that greatly declined for a few years and it's still kind of depressed and working its way back up. And running the numbers, like what it saved homeowners, in our opinion, just didn't justify making that switch. And so I have similar concerns. You know, I think it's something we're certainly going to have to negotiate with the House if that bill comes out. But I think particularly that drastic probably just doesn't make sense. You're playing with the same dollar amount, right? It's just moving stuff around. And so there was another great concern that I'm trying to think of because we actually just talked about this in our caucus, and there wasn't a lot of love for like greatly increasing the residential exemption because of the concerns you raised.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other thing I would point out is that would require a constitutional amendment. So that would be something that would go to a vote of people. Obviously, most people are going to believe that they're going to see a property tax shift or reduction, when in reality it will be more of a shift. Okay, I mean, and even there, because property tax makes up so much of the base, I mean, residential makes up so much of the base, everyone thinks, okay, well, we could shift that money out to commercial. I think it could actually have a detrimental effect, because commercials that are barely hanging on, you know, over the 40-year-old strip malls that are barely hanging on are going to just start going big.
Yep.
Okay, and so you're going to see a significant. It's not as simple as, oh, yeah, we're just going to increase. You know, it's a fixed budget, and
There is, and I don't think this is at the municipal level, but the other issue you're seeing is property tax creep, right? And Truth in Taxation has done its intended purpose for the large part, but what we're seeing is that counties are reclassifying what new growth might mean, and then that new growth gets passed on to everybody. I mean, we've seen some places, some cities, or counties, I should say, not cities, that are, if you add an awning onto your house, they're giving that new growth, right? And so that's new dollar amounts, which raises everybody's tax, as opposed to just reassessing one particular property and keeping the overall revenue the same. They're adding new growth where it really hasn't been contemplated before, and that's where we're seeing a lot of that creep. And so there might be an attempt to address that as well.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll just talk. I think, can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So another local issue for us is short-term rentals, because we are right here at the base of the canyons. And in the legislature, when I was there, I worked on that issue quite a bit. And here locally, Council Member Highland has started a working group on short-term rentals. And so do you want to say anything?
Well, if you don't already know, the elephant in the room is that we are a residential suburban gateway to the canyons. We're 32,000 something people, 2.75% of the population of Salt Lake County, and yet there's 9 million visitors to the Cottonwood Canyons. And so we're feeling a big squeeze. We don't want to become a resort community. We don't want 20% of our houses to be short-term rentals, but we already see there's 500 illegal short-term rentals in our city. And so the compliance part of that is been very tricky, especially with the Notwell rule, and we know that was modified last year. But we need to be able to exert some local control so that we don't get overrun. We want to take advantage of the visitor economy, but we don't want it to overrun us. And so there are things like we're getting requests to help run a shuttle program up to Bonanza Flats. Well, we're this tiny little city where the whole county is coming to the canyons. And so like everybody else, we're asking, we have our hands out a little bit to say, please help. It's not just Utahns that come to Cottonwood Canyons. Most of the time when I'm on the ski lift, I hear a foreign language. So we're bearing what's becoming an increasing burden. Like Councilmember Burrell said, even about the traffic, this still has not been addressed. And so my plea to you is to just recognize and talk about us as a gateway city. You've done a lot for the rural gateway cities. They're feeling a disproportionate burden. We're feeling it. I just don't think it's recognized because we have a big metro around us. So help with some short-term rental policy changes that allow us to better enforce the short-term rentals without having to jump through a year's worth of hoops to get one off that short-term rental list would really help us, I think.
I've got one more thing.
Okay.
There is a bill that is a short-term rental preemption bill that has been filed. I've been working with the sponsor to try to give, ideally I think there should be some sort of coming together between the two sides. You've got VRBO who really is trying to ensure that local control continues to be part of their equation, and you have the other big player who's not as fond of that. And so there is a preemption bill, basically says municipalities and counties cannot regulate the operation of short-term rentals. And instead, Arizona has a law that they passed, I want to say maybe 3-4 years ago, that I think was a pretty decent middle ground. And so I've been working with the sponsor to try to get them to move towards that middle ground. And I think what it is short-term rentals can't make cities cannot make short-term rentals completely illegal. But at the same time, you have to meet in the middle, and you've got to get a business license, and municipalities have to have the ability for those bad actors, for party houses, drug houses, whatever it might be, to be actually give the ability, and Arizona did a 3 strikes rule, that if you get 3 citations, you have to be removed from the platform and you no longer have a business license. So, the argument was that short-term rentals will say, hey, I didn't know that there was that one bad actor. Okay, cool. Strike 1. You've got 2 more strikes. Make sure you're vetting your people. But as you look at these preemption bills, which you will see one this session, just, I think, ask the question of how can we get municipalities and these online platforms to meet in the middle? There is a way. I've suggested some language to him, but just know that that's coming.
Didn't we pass a bill that created kind of like a pilot program for cities to opt into that middle ground type program?
No.
No, you had the Notwell rule originally, then you had a little amendment and change to the Notwell rule, which made it a little easier for municipalities. And then now you've got some of these groups coming for full preemption. And I don't think we've ever landed where we've really needed or wanted to land. And there's still some work that needs to be done there.
Jim?
Yeah, so just along the short-term rental discussion, I think another impact to short-term rentals generally is housing availability. So you see this in Hawaii especially, or any resort community where, if short-term rentals are allowed generally in a city, it's not a bad thing, but if you don't have controls and guardrails, you start getting investors purchasing properties solely for a short-term rental purpose, which then pushes all the residents and people that actually need to live here and that work here out of the community. So especially in areas like Cottonwood Heights where it's so convenient and so close to the canyons, that could be a real issue where
as homes come up for sale, investors will buy them, convert them to a short-term rental, and now we don't have housing for people that actually need to live here permanently. So I don't know if that's been an issue in Utah. I think the governor's office did some research, I think it was last year, the year before, on just general statistics on rental properties in the state, and I think short-term rentals are a subset of that, but that's another concern that we have here as a city is, we need to retain housing stock for people that need to live here permanently and not just for the tourists. So having controls and ability to regulate the percentage or total number would be really helpful, which we have now, but I guess if the state stepped in and said, we have to allow them everywhere residential is allowed, that could be problematic because we could see entire condo buildings or neighborhoods into resort communities essentially. St. George and Washington have had big issues with this, and I'm probably aware of that. So.
Well, you have it, Jim. Do you want to talk about LUDMA? At the end of this page on CED, housing and development, it says LUDMA is becoming overly complicated and difficult to navigate, too much detail and nuance. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I think we're all familiar with the Land Use Development and Management Act. I think it was initially adopted in 2006, but since that time it's continually being updated. I don't remember the exact number, but last year there were, I think, over 300 bills proposed to changes to LUDMA, which makes sense. There's a lot of things in there that we can clean up, but I almost feel like as planners and economic development folks, it's like we're out in the ocean and there's just waves keep coming and we're drowning. We're like, okay, I think we're gonna breathe, we're gonna get our head above water, and then bam, another wave crashes. So we're not able to catch up on the changes with everything that come from the legislature. And I think there's a lot of great intentions and it's a lot of great minds behind the changes, but it takes a while to incorporate and implement a lot of these things because we're, as a city, invested in making sure that the residents are engaged, that there's a public process. The state also requires certain noticing requirements and things. So for us to enact edits to our city code, it takes a little while. And if we're continually having to do that just to keep up with what the state's saying, it's really overwhelming, and that doesn't include all the stuff we're trying to do just in-house locally to clean up our own code internally, as well as request to process development reviews and things like that. So I think generally it's been overwhelming, but it's also difficult to navigate in the state code because a lot of different topics are scattered in different areas. And I know that the LUDMA was recently moved to Chapter 20, which I think helped kind of reorganize and restructure some of that content. But there's a lot of information that's even scattered in like the Health and Human Services chapters that would regulate businesses for daycares or elderly facilities, things like that that are zoning and land use related for business licensing. But it's really difficult and it's getting really hard to know all the different sections and chapters that we even need to look at to know how to regulate, but then also how to update our code. So it's a moving target constantly too, right? So it's like, okay, we think we got our handle on this, and then it's different, and now we've got to relearn everything. And a staff of 2 or 3 planners doesn't have the capacity to keep up with that barrage. So.
Thank you, Jim. And we'll keep it right there with Scott, because the next pages are finance. And this was my 4th campaign in 6 years. So I was hearing, as I was running for this office, that our city has not raised our property taxes since 2018. And so I'll just let Scott give the details of where we're at financially as a city.
Okay. Excuse me. So the years on this correspond with our fiscal year, so the tax year is 1 year less than the fiscal year is. So our first property tax year for our city was 2006. In 2005, we weren't able to do that early enough in that year in order to be able to do property taxes. So you can see that if you track the property taxes, the only bump in there is in the 2019 fiscal year. If you take out that year that generated about $980,000, $981,000 of new revenue, our average property tax increase in any of those given years is, and that's from new growth, is $50,000, almost $51,000. On a budget of 25-ish million in any of those given years, that's not a lot of growth. And that's approximately 1/3 of our revenues that we get in the city. So when 1/3 of your revenues is in essence flat year over year, it's hard to tackle things like increased costs and those kinds of things. And that's a challenge that we have. Back in the the late teens, 2018, 19, we were seeing sales tax increases that were bumped up 70%. We had a few that went into the teens in terms of year-over-year increases, but the last 3 years have been in essence flat. We even had 1 year where we were about 20,000 less than the year before in sales taxes. So when your sales taxes, which is yet another third of your revenue, are flat, it's a challenge of how do you handle, because costs of living are creeping up that whole time and everything. So that's a challenge that we face over here. And in a city like ours, we were talking about the residential exemption. In a city like ours, I don't know the exact ratio of commercial versus residential, but if you were in South Salt Lake and you were going to make that change, it's not that big of a deal. There's such little stock in terms of the value, the ratio of residential to commercial. But in a city like ours, I fear that would shift so much of the burden to commercial that we would become, no business would ever come into our city if that was the case, because it would cost so much for that business from a property tax perspective to come into our city that it would be just detrimental in many, many ways. And so any bedroom community would be treated similar like that, where any largely commercialized entity, city, would not have that same effect going on, and it would be much more desirable for city development to occur in those areas from that perspective.
So I think relative to that tax, I guess reallocation or shift would be, my major concern is that generally nationwide, the commercial footprint in cities is getting smaller. So we're seeing this in a lot of other states where abandoned shopping centers or vacant shopping centers are converting into residential, right? So if we're taking the residential tax off the table and saying, oh, it's okay, the commercial will pay for it, but the commercial is vanishing, I think at some point we're going to be back in the same position saying, okay, well now what we thought maybe didn't happen, we need to re-strategize. And we're even seeing that with the town center property where it's an old commercial strip center that will still retain some commercial and office, but will also incorporate some residential. So thinking through that is important.
If it's okay, can I just skip the annexation and go to the next page really quick?
No, no, you may not.
Yeah, we come back to it.
Okay.
So I can be finished.
No, we are not taking annexation off the table.
Annexation is a big thing, but it's not my thing.
Okay, all right.
So, on the franchise taxes and things, so we're allowed to charge 6% on a power bill or a gas bill, not gas in cars, but natural gas, in order to do different things like that. But what has happened is over the years, as people have gotten more efficient, whether it's from LED light bulbs or what have you, and their power consumption reduces, that has a direct impact on our revenues, especially when we don't have growth to offset or mask that change. It's a good change, right? We want to see efficiencies and those kinds of things, but the unintended consequences that our revenues decrease. So in this example that I outlined in here is if you have a 25% reduction in your power, that equals into a 25% reduction in our revenues. And on the flip side, the only way we can make that up is if the entity, whether it's Rockman Power or whoever else, increases their rates by actually 33% in order for us to get our revenues back up just to where they were. It doesn't increase them, it just gets them back up to where they were. And we do see rates change, but sometimes they go up and sometimes they go down. And so, we have absolutely no influence in that sphere. And so that's another source of revenue that we depend on that unfortunately we're seeing decrease on us as that goes on. Gas, and both natural gas and power, same thing, but you get your heating systems and other things. You have the same effect. For cable TV, we've seen our cable TV franchise tax dipping year after year after year after year, and that's because people are going to streaming services, and we don't have streaming services like we do cable TV. So the cable TV companies are at a disservice because they're operating, not on an equal playing field. And so if we were able to charge a, franchise tax on internet, that would even that field up a little bit more, because then the streaming services would be impacted very similarly to what cable TV is, and it would then bolster things a little bit for us. Now, as everybody gets more efficient and charges less in competition, you still kind of have some of that thing that will be similar. But even on telephone costs have shifted between, used to be, a cell phone bill was $60 a month. Now it's $40 a month maybe is the average. And if we're seeing that $40 isn't all telecom, it's split between data or internet and telecom. And so our revenues get, pushed down as we do that. So if we're able to capture some revenues on the internet or data portion of that, it would be beneficial to the city, and that would be, all city from our city as we move forward. I think those are the main items. We have finance that I added, but we'll go back to the annexation.
You don't mind if I just cut in real fast? I apologize.
You got to teach.
I got a whole bunch of sixth graders who come back from the library here in a minute and be like, where's our teacher? I would love, if it's okay, just to make this an option. I would love to just sit down with you all. I'm a teacher, but I'm a great student. This is fascinating. And I would love to just learn as much as I can about these issues going forward. I'm going to run out the door, but my telephone and email, I just live like 5 minutes that way. I'm always available to you. And Mayor, council members, if I could, I would love to just schedule time. Probably not right now, but after the session especially. And then during the session, as these issues come up in bills, and as you bring back that bill that should pass, move that word forward.
The pilot program.
Yeah.
I was the floor sponsor, that's why I was like, I thought we did that, but it didn't pass. That's why.
Pilot program for.
Yeah.
So just if you would keep me apprised as these things are coming up, and then I would love to go to Collin Heights 101 as soon as possible. Just thank you so much for taking the time to detail all this for us. And again,
Thank you.
I apologize.
No, thank you.
Chicken nuggets at recess await me.
Okay, thank you. Just to end our discussion of finance, so Senator Cullimore, as you came in, I expressed, but just to reiterate, because of this drawdown, Scott, do you want to say anything about that? Why is that so low on 2006? 26.
We're partway through the year. We haven't looked at all of our revenues yet.
Okay. So, but we have been eating into our reserve over the past 7 years. And so it's to the point where we're not in a good place. If we don't increase our revenue or reduce our expenses, which they have been trying to do for these 7 years, we're not in a good place to have enough reserve to match grants or to do other important, or if a true emergency comes up, we're using our reserve to cover our operating and maintenance. So it's just not a good spot. So that's why we are concerned. Now we'll talk more about annexation.
Okay. I will be brief out of respect for your time, Senator Cullimore, and that now you're the only one in the room. So you, I believe, were the co-sponsor of the bill to bring all the county islands into a city. And since that time, we've had 3 annexations, and they've pretty much followed, or had, there are 3 different processes, and with wild interpretations from all the cities, from attorneys, it's been a nightmare. And then last year, the annexation rule changed again. And so we were working on an annexation here just south of Creek Road, and we just had to abandon it. So the Wilf Summer Corn, are you familiar with Wilf? At the He's an advocate of annexation overhaul. And there's two things I want you to be aware of. The annexation policy right now is really focused on growth cities. And I've been in the ULCT housing subcommittee talking about this. And so many of the changes are looking at that only from that perspective and not from how it's impacting us with picking up all these unincorporated islands. One of the challenges too is that we brought in part of unincorporated Salt Lake County in July, and we thought that we would start getting revenue for that. We're not going to see revenue for that area until November of this next year. So almost 18 months where we're providing services, but we don't get any revenue. So that's another hiccup. So I don't know if it can be cleaned up on aisle 9 this legislative session, and it might be too late, but the annexation is so complex, so misunderstood. If the cities had a checklist of what we're supposed to do, I think we could do it easier, and we have so much less frustration for the citizens, because I keep going back to them and they're looking at me like, why can't you get this done? Literally, I can't get this done for them because of the complexity in the annexation code.
Do you mind if I add to that?
Please.
So the process, as we've gone back and forth with the county and the Lieutenant Governor's office, the information we've been given changes, the interpretation that the different staff members have. So having a checklist that is clearly defined so that everyone is on the same page would help significantly for everybody involved.
Just my private practice, I've done a little bit of annexation work, but is it a little bit different when you're annexing like Cottonwood Heights already existing and incorporated stuff as opposed to like new annexations? Is that part of the complication?
Yes, so with the growth cities, my understanding is that there are developers who want to develop a piece of property, but they want to take advantage of the city, and so they want to be able to bring their development to the city, almost force the city to take the annexed. So that's where the focus is right now, and I think what we're really asking is for you and the legislature to take into account not just the growth cities, but how that impacts us in the county, Salt Lake County. I don't even think it's just Salt Lake. Oh, yes, it is, because of the unincorporated islands. Do you want to add anything, Shane, about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. And I don't want to take a ton of your time. I just want it on your radar, the complexities of how challenging it's been for our cities. And every time also that we bring in an unincorporated area, we have to do a meets and bounds survey. So that's like $10,000. So you live in Sandy. So every time Sandy brings in like the 4 little homes that were the holdouts to come in, they're paying $10,000 for meets and bounds survey. So it starts to add up and becomes a huge cost. And again, we're not getting revenues for that because of the way the property tax is structured. They joined us in 2025. They're not actually going to be they're not going to be property tax till 2026. We don't see that 2026 revenue till November. So you can see that lag in the revenue cycle.
I understand part of the problem with the lag is a lot of these little islands have service contracts that don't necessarily expire when the annexation happens, and I think that's part of it, right? Like, at least some of the islands by where I live, Salt Lake County is still servicing them even after they annex into Sandy for a period of time because they have contracts with the trash pickup or whatever, right?
When I was just wondering, if part of it is some administrative decisions by Salt Lake County versus maybe what the legislature, put upon the county. I think Salt Lake County could make it more administratively streamlined. I think some of it is, frankly, the county's fault.
Okay.
Can I say something too? In a lot of these negotiations, sometimes your biggest adversaries are not necessarily the legislature. Your bigger adversaries might be other cities who have competing approaches to how they want to control us. Because we're not the same. Cottonwood Heights is not the same as...
No, Shane. I'm going to have you talk about the legal... No, Shane.
Harriman doesn't have really a lot of islands because it started small and then they're just expanding out. And they're expanding out as developers come in and say, okay, we want to bring this in. And that becomes a dance with the developer and the city in regards to land use. Because the last thing you want to do is say, well, we'll come in and we trust you, you're going to make good decisions on what we can do with our land. So they try and shop between, well, do I want to go to Riverton or Harriman or South Jordan? And where am I going to get the best deal for the development of my land? And so there's this shopping approach going on, whereas the infill items, you're doing hand-to-hand combat with the individual homeowners who are convinced that somehow staying in an island or going to Sandy or someplace else is going to be financially better for them. And the complication of the municipal services is, I own some homes in unincorporated county down by the Willow Creek Golf Course that have now been annexed into Sandy. And county always maintained, well, we have a lower property tax, lower property tax. And I finally told Mayor McAdams, I said, Ben, knock that crap off, or I'm going to go out and knock on all these doors and tell these neighbors, yeah, you have a lower property tax, but you're paying the Wasatch Front Waste, and you're paying all these special service district fees. And I said, there's just ways of doing that. And I said, if you add up all those fees, the county's significantly more expensive. So anyway, so every time an annexation bill hits, the leading cities and townships and other cities have competing interests. It's not a whole lot of time. Usually where the legislature deviates from what the leader says, all right, this is where we've reached a compromise. And sometimes, does that make sense?
It does. I'm really grateful for the bill, by the way. Getting rid of the islands, fantastic. It's just that the process is so gummed up that the citizens aren't empowered to choose the city they want to live in. That we've taken that away.
I'd be happy to talk about it. Maybe we can use some carve-outs because there is essentially a checklist when you're new annexation, right? It's like, here's what you go through, but I don't really know what the difference could be with the infill.
If I could, the confusion that we run into is there's two different initiatives. There's a resident initiative and then there's a city initiative. Each one of those has very similar steps, but nuances in them. And then you're dealing with three entities. You're dealing with the municipality. Then when you hit the county, you're dealing with the executive and the legislative. And each one of those has to sign off, but once one signs, it goes to another, and then there's an interpretation of that one. So it's a back and forth there, and back, and then it goes to the lieutenant governor, so it goes to state level. And then we hit this 3-4 times on this last one. It's been sent down the line to the one below, back to us, back. And I don't think it's the bills, the state bills. You can go through them. They almost make your own checklist, right? The problem is the interpretation of those. From an engineer's point of view, 2 letters mean the exact same thing, but the person reviewing it said, I like the letters turned the other way. So we went back 3 weeks in a process, so we missed a deadline. So it's one of those, from the engineer's point of view, that's where we run into it. It was a pretty straightforward process. The residents wanted it. There was no argument. They said, we want to join Cottonwood Heights. And we're still trying to get that through. So that's our frustration that I think we're trying to express here. So, Mayor, I don't know if that's, maybe it wasn't appropriate to say that.
No, that was perfect. That was really good. We're going to try and wrap up since you're our final legislator here. And I'd just like Shane Topham to talk about, there's an issue with legal prosecutorial services that he's going to explain that we are probably going to work with Senator Pitcher because it involves Holiday as well.
Cottonwood Heights, like probably most of the other 250 or so cities and towns in Utah, does not have an on-staff prosecutor to prosecute class 1 misdemeanors and lower that arise in the city. And so the way Cottonwood Heights has obtained those services is via interlocal agreement with Holiday. Holiday has a justice court. We contract with Holiday for justice court services, which is a kind of soup to nuts contract that includes not only the judge and the facility, but also prosecution and indigent defense services. We thought that was a smart, efficient use of public monies about 1.5 or 2 years ago. got drug into a lawsuit with Holiday by a convicted person who subsequently said that we didn't have the right to use a contract prosecutor. And so that drug along, won at district court level, went up to appeal to the Utah Supreme Court, and then eventually the plaintiff threw in the towel on a procedural issue. But his counsel said that he felt that the legal issue, whether contract prosecutors could be used, remained, and intended to bring that up in the future. So we have, as the mayor said, put together a little bill to try to address this issue as much as can be addressed via statute, and that's going to be filed, or has been filed, by Senator Pitcher. For your interest, what we're trying to do is just mimic the right of a city attorney to deputize any other attorney, whether a public prosecutor or a private attorney, to do certain services, including prosecutorial services, that matches the language that is available to county attorneys in the state code.
Thank you, Shane. And then I just want to give some time to our police, because they have not had a moment. So.
Well, thank you, and I'll be brief, because you're already all up in the room. The one issue you know a lot about, and that's the Guardian program with Representative Wilcox. So he's given us the mandate to move it forward, and we very much like to move it forward. We support it 1,000%. It's just no one's going to pay for it. Canyons has proved, or they like a model that we've presented, to shift the burden and the liability, the training and everything to us. We will take that, but there's a cost to it. They just don't have the money to fund it. So I don't know how to fix that. And nobody wants to take ownership of how we fund it. And I imagine it'll come up again this year. I imagine Representative Wilcox will have some amendments. And he'll probably be frustrated that statewide we're not getting the people trained. Even the guardians that do exist aren't getting trained. So I don't know if you have a comment on that, or just want to put it in.
I'm sure we can find money in the education part.
No, your friend would fight back. It's not here. Okay.
And there are a couple things, but I'll speak to one of them that the detectives had brought up to me when they knew we were coming here. Representative Marie Polson did a good job and helped us with some revenge porn statutes a few years ago. And we've had, there's a couple cases, and let me just tell you about one. We had a woman who was in a relationship, and she was with a man, and what had happened is he ejaculated on her face and then took pictures of it. And you know where this is going, because the relationship ended, and then he used trophy pictures and disseminated those pictures. And we were able to find him, and we got a case, but we take to the DA, and they won't file on it, because in the statute it doesn't specifically carve out semen as something that would trigger the statute and qualify for charges. So it's not a big change, but we would love some help in amending the statute to include some things to protect these women who are victims of this crime. And so whoever could, whatever referral we could get, we'd love some help with that.
Good.
So, do you have anything? Okay, I'll try to keep it short.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Chief, do you know what the statewide association, have you approached the statewide association of prosecutors and other prosecutors? Because that should be a relatively, it's probably just an oversight. I mean, does that make sense? And something to swap, if they drafted up the language, you shouldn't have a problem finding a sponsor.
Great, and I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's one of those things that you don't think of it until it comes out, and then you have to make the pivot. So, it was just an issue in Salt Lake County with the DA's office.
It's not a conversation I anticipate at this point.
To liven things up or something.
Especially from Cottonwood Heights. Well, thank you, Chief, and we'll let you go, but thank you for coming. And next year we'll have this breakfast in December before we're so close to the session.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming.
Definitely. Thank you.